It is indeed my pleasure and honor to speak again at the annual patient meeting of the Desmoid Tumor Research Foundation. And I would like to talk about challenges in exploiting medical therapies for desmoid tumors. And I would like to give my talk on behalf of the Desmoid Tumor Working Group. As you all know, we are talking about a monoclonal fibroblastic proliferation, which is characterized by a variable and often unpredictable clinical course. The incidence of desmoid tumors is around 5 to 6 cases per 1 million of the population per annum. And as you all know, a couple of years ago, we have started a consensus initiative due to the fact that there was no level 1 or 2 evidence for the treatment approach for desmoid tumors available, and there were only very few prospectively conducted studies and meta-analysis. So our first roundtable meeting dates back to May 2014, where patients and patient advocates from Sarcoma Patients Euronet and medical experts from the ERTC soft tissue and bone sarcoma group met in Frankfurt, Germany. And we came up with the first position paper on the management of sporadic desmoid type fibromatosis, which was published in the European Journal of Cancer. This was updated 2 years later in the Annals of Oncology in 2017, and in 2018 the Desmoid Tumor Working Group went global with a meeting in June 2018 in Milan. And these are the topics which we covered during that meeting. Of course, we talked about pathology and molecular genetics, about indications for an active treatment, including radiotherapy. We talked about the available medical therapies in different indications, the assessment of treatment effects, pain, quality of life, fertility and pregnancy. And we also dedicated a chapter of this meeting and of this publication to endpoints, study designs, and regulatory requirements for desmoid tumors. And I would like to focus now on the systemic treatment landscape for desmoid tumors. Here you can see the different available systemic treatment options: anti-hormonal therapies, chemotherapies, targeted therapies, which means the tyrosine kinase inhibitors, and most recently gamma secretase inhibitor therapy. Starting with the anti-hormonal therapies, only case reports and small series are available here. The reported response rates vary up to 50%. However, there is no clear rationale available and a very low evidence. Nevertheless, anti-hormonal therapies are still often used in Europe due to the easy availability, the low costs, and the rather few side effects. But we did not give a general recommendation for the use of anti-hormonal therapies. Here you can see an old overview of case reports and small series evaluating this treatment strategy. The first and only prospective study evaluating the combination of tamoxifen plus solindac comes from the Children Oncology Group, 59 patients who have been treated with this combination of tamoxifen and solindac. However, only 10 patients completed the therapy without progressive disease or withdrawal. The overall response rate was 8%, and the 2 years progression-free survival rate was 36%, which is, by the way, the same as the placebo arm in the sorafenib study. So this is the first and only prospective study evaluating this combination with rather low activity in terms of overall survival, overall response, and PFS rates. Regarding chemotherapy, The indication for chemotherapy are non-resectable, rapidly growing and/or symptomatic or even life-threatening desmoid tumors, and they should preferably be treated with chemotherapy. The only prospective phase 2 study evaluating the combination of methotrexate plus vinblastine again comes from the pediatric population, 28 patients who have been treated with this treatment combination for up to 1 year. Overall response rate 19%, which is the same as the placebo arm in the sorafenib study, and 8 patients remain free of progression at a median of 43 months from study entry. So this combination of methotrexate and vinblastine demonstrated progression arrest in about 1/3 of the children, and it is definitely the chemotherapy regimen of choice in the pediatric patient population. Here you can see selected chemotherapy regimens which have been put together here in a publication in The Oncologist. However, no randomized studies are available here. The French sarcoma group retrospectively analyzed 62 patients who have been treated with different chemotherapies, 71% with combination therapy, 29% with monotherapy, 21% with anthracycline-based chemotherapies, and the responses are depicted here. 2% complete responses, 19% partial responses, and 60% of the patients had stable disease. The response rate was definitely higher for the anthracycline-based regimens. So if chemotherapy is indicated and a rapid response is needed, then you should go for an anthracycline-based regimen, and pegylated liposomal doxorubicin may be preferred in this young patient population with less cardiac toxicity. Moving to the targeted therapy, it has all started with imatinib. There was the US phase 2 study with 19 patients being treated with 800 milligram imatinib daily with an overall response rate of 16%. This study was followed by the phase 2 study from the French sarcoma group, 35 patients being treated with 400 milligram imatinib daily, overall response rate 11%. And the progression arrest rates after 3, 6, and 12 months were 90, 80, and 70% respectively. The 2-year progression-free survival rate was 55% and the overall survival rate 95%. Within the German interdisciplinary sarcoma group, we also run a study evaluating imatinib in recessed progressive desmoid tumors, and we could clearly demonstrate a sustained progression arrest in this dedicated patient population. And this was published in the European Journal of Cancer in 2017. The next tyrosine kinase inhibitor, which was evaluated in the first large phase 3 randomized study ever performed in desmoid tumors, was sorafenib. And the study clearly could demonstrate an advantage for sorafenib compared to placebo in terms of progression-free survival. The overall response rate was 30% in the sorafenib arm compared to 20% in the placebo arm. The French sarcoma group evaluated pazopanib in progressive desmoid tumor patients in the Desmoid trial, compared to a chemotherapy combination consisting of methotrexate and vinblastine. The primary endpoint of this study was the non-progression rate at 6 months of therapy, which was 84% in the pazopanib arm compared to 45% in the chemotherapy arm. So again, there was a clear benefit in favor of the tyrosine kinase inhibitor pazopanib. The next group of treatment options are the gamma secretase inhibitor, and the first one, which could demonstrate activity in desmoid tumors, was nirogacestat, which has been evaluated in a small phase 2 study in 17 patients who are depicted here. The responses are shown in this plot, where you can see 5 partial responses and none of the patients demonstrated a progression under treatment with nirogacestat. Nirogacestat was overall well tolerated with hardly any grade 3 or grade 2 adverse events. There were only a couple of grade 1 adverse events. And based on these findings, a phase 3 study was initiated called nirogacestat for adults with desmoid tumors, aggressive fibromatosis, the DeFi trial, which finalized recruitment about 1 year ago in summer 2020, and we are of course eagerly awaiting the results of this trial. This is the design of the nirogacestat trial, a 1-to-1 randomization comparing nirogacestat versus placebo. There is the possibility of a crossover from the placebo arm in case of progression to the open label nirogacestat arm. The primary endpoint of this study is progression-free survival. And here, the first patient was dosed in May 2019, and the study finalized recruitment in summer 2020. Another gamma secretase inhibitor currently being tested in desmoid tumor patients is the one which has been developed from Ayala, AL102, which is tested in a kind of seamless combined phase 2, phase 3 study. In the first part, in the part A, the optimal treatment regimen is evaluated, and in the second part, in the part B, in a 2-to-1 randomization, AL102 is being tested versus placebo in 156 patients. This is an efficacy summary of the different studies with the tyrosine kinase inhibitors and the gamma secretase inhibitors. Here you can see the 4 studies evaluating imatinib. This is the sorafenib study, the Desmoid study with pazopanib, and last but not least, the data from nirogacestat, the gamma secretase inhibitor. And what you can also see here, that only 2 studies, the one from Germany and the one from France, really required a RECIST progressive disease as an inclusion criteria. So in summary, the medical treatment options for desmoid tumors, we did not give any recommendation for the use of anti-hormonal therapies. Chemotherapy may be indicated in rapidly growing and or symptomatic or even life-threatening desmoid tumors. Tyrosine kinase inhibitors such as sorafenib and pazopanib clearly demonstrated clinical activity in randomized settings and move into the focus of interest. Gamma secretase inhibitors promise to be effective agents, and currently nirogacestat and AL102 are being evaluated in clinical studies. But you have always keep in mind that the majority of the mentioned drugs do not have a formal registration for desmoid tumors and therefore are not available or reimbursed in many European countries. So let me have a look now to our Desmoid Global Consensus and what we summarized and here for the available medical therapies. So due to the lack of comparative studies, we are still not able to propose a definitive sequence of the existing systemic treatment options. Randomized data only exist for sorafenib, pazopanib, and the combination of methotrexate plus vinblastine. So in general, it is reasonable to employ the less toxic therapy initially, followed by more toxic agents in a stepwise fashion. And out of the variety of possible systemic treatment options, one can be chosen, taking into account the level of evidence, the overall response rate, the progression-free survival rate, the ease of administration, and the expected toxicity of the administered drug. And this it can be evaluated in a kind of 5-dimensional model, which is depicted here. And this is the treatment algorithm we developed in our global consensus meeting and publication. So the Desmoid Global Consensus is available in a nice layout form. It is publicly available over the websites of the Desmoid Tumor Research Foundation and Sarcoma Patients Euronet. And it is also available in a scientific publication, which has been published in the European Journal of Cancer at the beginning of 2020. And having said that, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all the participants, all the patients and patient advocates, and all the medical experts who contributed to this work within the Desmoid Tumor Working Group. And I would like to say thank you for your attention, for your interest in this disease, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments here. Thank you very much.